Hi, everybody. Today's Thursday, March 19th, 2026, and our dear friend or brother, Alex Krainer, is here with us. Welcome back, Alex.
Hi, Nima. Good to be with you again, and greetings to everyone out there.
Alex, let's start with the new escalations in the Middle East, the attack on South Pars, you know, oil facilities in Iran, one of the most important major, sources of the oil in Iran, and it's hugely important for Iran. And it was a major attack on the part of Israelis and the United States. Then we've learned that Iran announced yesterday that they're going to attack Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. They they issued a warning for the people, civilians who are living nearby, and they all left, and they were hit. The targets were hit basically in Qatar and UAE were some major attacks, and together with this Saudi Arabia. What is your understanding of the new escalations that are happening right now with the war?
Well, the one that always escalates, it seems, is Israel, with U.S. support. You know, we see a lot of narrative now going about that this is all Israel, Israel, Israel. Yes, that's true, but Trump owns it now. He owns it now. There's no way around it. So this is his, and I can see that these narratives are going around, because one side will try to pin it against the other, and then the other side will try to pin it on the other, because this is really truly awful. But the other day I watched a podcast by an Israeli journalist, and I'm sorry that I forget his name. He is worth remembering, a good guy. And he was saying, look, whatever happens, Israel will always escalate. This is just how it is. So you can practically take it to the bank that they will escalate no matter what happens. Because at this point, the whatever Israel does, they count on the rest of the world, primarily the United States and NATO and Western allies, to come to their aid. So the worse the better, as far as they're concerned, because they want to try to unite the West against Iran. So they just do whatever they think they can to make things worse. I don't know if that will work if they escalate to nuclear weapons, if they launch a nuclear attack, but there's a lot of rumors and there's a lot of talk about Israel orchestrating a false flag attack in the United States that they would then try to blame on Iran. So this is where we are. The reason why I think that we can't get around Trump owning this is because this was all pretty much foreseen. If you attack Iran, very likely you're going to get a regional war. If you get a regional war, there's risk that you get a nuclear world war. And this is, one of the reasons why I wrongly assumed that Trump would never do this, because it's just so incredibly insane and reckless, and for no discernible gain that I can tell. This doesn't serve U.S. interests. To the contrary, this doesn't serve Iranian interests, obviously. It doesn't serve Europe's interests. I don't see how it serves Israeli interests either, other than Benjamin Netanyahu's own personal, political, and eschatological ambitions, which are now, it seems, they are a real part of this equation. It was about a year ago, Nima, that we talked about this, the whole eschatological dimension of this, and it sounded weird at the time, it sounded weird to me as well. I got it from a friend of mine who is a Muslim, but who studies, Islamic and Christian and Jewish eschatologies, and he alerted me to this. And then when I read up about it a little bit, I thought, Well, it does kind of sound like this is what it is, even though you always hope it can't possibly be that irrational, fundamentalist, religious fanatics are in charge. And then even less, that the president of the United States would go along with that. But this is where we are. Now, the consequences of the attack on the gas fields, they attacked, Iran responded in a way they said they would respond. So they were warned, you do this, we will do this. Puts us in a world of trouble now. We don't really know. We're going to have an energy crisis. The energy crisis will spill over into a food production crisis. That comes on top of already years of Western nations deliberately destroying agricultural production. I don't know where it goes. I hate to try to predict, but it's only making a bad situation worse. And amazingly, apart from maybe the Prime Minister of Belgium and then Viktor Orban and Robert Fico, it doesn't seem that any of these officials ever stop and think, well, if we continue this way, we're kind of running off a cliff. So we need to stop and reassess what we're doing and then take some constructive, positive steps to mitigate all the dangers that are coming our way. They're just doubling down. They're saying, pedal to the metal, full speed ahead. Honestly, if somebody told me 5 years ago that this would be happening, I'm already very conspiracy inclined, but I would say no, that just can't be.
Exactly. Alex, it's not just you. When I was in Iran, I was asked by my friends, everybody was asking my friends, is he gonna attack Iran? Is Donald Trump going to attack? I said, no, he's not stupid. He knows, he follows the money. The money doesn't go there if he wants to. That is, I was somehow, so stupid to think that way. I think
Nima,
this guy is just.
I have been listening these days. I tried to go a little bit outside of the usual voices, So we have some Turkish military analysts, some Indian and Pakistani analysts, military, geopolitical, and so forth. Croatian and Serbian military analysts, French analysts, and so forth. Italian. I tried to listen to different voices from different parts of the world. And many of these people are saying the same things. Basically, I was very supportive of what Trump was doing because he seemed to have the right instincts. And, he was taking on the global order. He was taking on the Europeans. He was breaking up the NATO alliance. A number of other things. And then it was obvious that up until last month, he was trying to avoid a conflict with Iran. And then something just turned, and everybody is in shock. Everybody's saying this is so completely insane that they like you and I, they have a hard time believing that this is even happening, and that Trump is continuing to, rather than saying this was an error, miscalculation, it's Marco Rubio or Jared Kushner, off with their heads, we're withdrawing. Iran, we apologize. That was a very bad idea. Let's sit down at the table. He's doubling down. He's owning it. He keeps talking. We're winning. We're winning. The Iranians are desperately crawling on their knees, begging us to stop. And so he's making it hard for himself to pull away. So all he has now is to keep doubling down and escalating, even as his allies are saying, thank you, we're not going with you. We're not doing this. This is a really, really bad idea. And so, in the end, this ends up always the same. This is why people thought up the story of Icarus. I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Got too ambitious, flew too close to the sun, and then the wax of his feathers melted, and he fell crashing to the ground and got killed. Now Trump is repeating this story.
Yeah. It's not just about you and me and many people out there. It's about, even Joe Kent. He was, his resignation shows that how these people were feeling before, and they thought that the United States is going in a wrong direction. That's why he decided to resign. I think it's a huge shift in what's going on. And Donald Trump is not, Alex, he's coming out and saying all these pictures, all these videos coming out of Iran, people on streets chanting and supporting the government, say it's all AI. You have to be told, I don't know where he's getting his information, his intelligence, but somebody is feeding him, or he's somehow believing in what he's talking about without considering the reality of what's going on in Iran.
I would agree with you, Nima, and I would say again, as I've said many times, nobody can be this stupid, but I was so wrong, and then I think that Trump himself must know all the same, because many of the things that he's saying are patently wrong, and he knows it, so he's lying. Like, nobody could have predicted that they would attack other countries. This is unfair. Mm-hmm. Well, he had his National Intelligence Council tell him that. He obviously chose to ignore it. He had his head of operations guy on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Fred Catcher, who told him we shouldn't be doing this. We can't win. He had a lot of intelligence telling him that this was an extremely bad idea, and he only had the Israelis around him, or Zionists around him, who were telling this, you got this, Mr. President, pull the trigger. And then he did. It appears that Nima, what is the name of the general who took over after Soleimani was killed? Do you know that?
Yeah, Ismail Ghani. Yeah.
Yes, Ismail Ghani. Apparently, the Israelis believed that they could take over because they had co-opted Ismail Ghani. And so they thought, we get our assets on the ground activated, Americans and our planes bomb from the air, and then our guy will take over, and then we're in business. But the Iranian leadership understood that Ghani was going to be a traitor, so they eliminated him, correct?
Yeah.
But still, even if this were true, Nima, it would be one thing for Israel to go into this adventure alone, because they have nothing to lose, they're done. But for Trump to go along with this, risk a regional war, risk being evicted from the region, risk a world war, a nuclear exchange, on a gamble, on just a gamble that he got from some of his close, not even advisors, cronies around him, and these Zionist fanatics. That is just insane. This is the kind of stuff that you would read in history books, that something that happened 1,000 years ago, and you would think like, gosh, how stupid the people were back then.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, but what is happening in the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz, is something I think so strategic for Iran and for years to come. This is the first moment that Iran is doing something in the Strait of Hormuz to check everything. And yeah, it's normal, Alex. My son is the same way. And what is happening, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz is something, with the war in Ukraine, we've seen that how Russia was forced to react, how Russia was forced to make a new position and to perceive how powerful it is. And with the war, with the tariff war, we've seen something totally different from China, hitting back at the United States. And right now is the time for Iran, and Iran is hitting back, and they're not backing down. And there is an article in the Financial Times, which I think it's beautiful. You read it, you see how the guy who wrote this article knows what he's talking about. And he argues that Iran's actions in the Strait of Hormuz show the reality of multipolar economic warfare. For decades, the United States dominated sanctions and used financial pressure as a strategic weapon. Now, other powers, including Iran and China, can use similar tools in response to escalation. This is what the reality, the outcome, or whatever is happening right now in the Middle East. I think just putting all this destruction, death and destruction, which is the reality of the unfortunate reality of this war. But the outcome so far is the Strait of Hormuz going to be controlled by Iranians, and they're not going to let this strait to be used freely by other countries. How do you see the importance of what has happened so far?
Well, I think that's that's exactly right. I think that Iranians have no incentive, no reason whatsoever to go back to the old status quo. Because it's not just decades, Nima, it's 120 years. This started in the early years of the 20th century, when the British realized that, the southeastern side of Iran was very rich with oil. And the British understood the importance of oil for, not just for energy, but also for strategic reasons, because, that was the time when everything was switching from steamships to oil ships, which had massive advantages over steam power. And so the British wanted to dominate the oil industry globally, oil production globally. And so already from 1902, 1903, they've been invading Iran. They've been occupying portions of Iran. They've been imposing wars on Iran, either directly or by proxy, like Iran-Iraq war. Saddam Hussein invaded Iran on behalf of the Western colonizers. Basically, he was directed by the CIA. He was a CIA man. And then Iran experienced famine twice in this period, with tens of thousands of people dying in 1917, and then again in the 1940s during World War II. And it wasn't war related, because Iran was neutral during World War II. It was exactly occupation related. And this never stopped. Sanctions, maximum pressure sanctions, financing of Iranian dissident terrorist guerrillas like MEK and so forth, assassination of Iranian scientists, of Iranian leaders, bombing of Iranian embassies around the world. why would Iran want this to continue? And with these maximum pressure sanctions, not only the state, but ordinary Iranian people have suffered. They were not able to develop their economy properly. They were not able to reach their full potential of a country that's extraordinarily rich, that has a huge, very well educated population. So it has huge potential, but it's being stunted and suffocated by the West, who says, you give us your resources or we're going to destroy you. So now that the war, now that the West started the fight, now that Trump and Israelis started the fight, now Iran is fully in their right to finish it, and to finish it on their terms, because, just saying, okay, ceasefire, let's go back to the table, we'll negotiate. That means that everything that the Israelis, the British, the Americans have been doing, they will do more of, and more, and they will continue. And so this is unbearable. This is intolerable completely. And now, okay, there's risk that other countries in the region are going to suffer, like the Saudis and the Kuwaitis. But they all made the deal with the devil, and so they lived high life by basically becoming proxy forces of Western powers on Iran's doorstep, and they cooperated. So they brought this on themselves. And they cannot reverse this fortune. I practically from the day one of this attack, I thought, what's the remedy? What is the remedy now? I think that the remedy would be a radical truth therapy. To simply own up to the truth as it is, to seek amends. And then part two of that would be to simply drop Israel, to cease all support to Israel, because only then will they be forced to find a compromise with their neighbors and with the Palestinian people. Otherwise, they never will. They will just keep killing and killing and killing and killing and killing. When they're tired of killing Palestinians, they will kill the Lebanese. When they're tired of bombing the Lebanese, they will be bombing the Jordanians, the Yemenis, and so forth. And then, people in Iraq and people in Iran. And then, they're already, when we're done with the Iranians, we're coming for Turkey, and then we're going for Pakistan. And so this will never end. And if the current political lineup in the United States stays intact, that means that every time Israelis escalate with a new enemy, that the United States is on the hook to own that war too. So if they go to war against Turkey, again, they drag the United States into it. If they go to war against Pakistan, they drag the United States into it. So the only winning move there is truth, radical truth, and dropping Israel. That's the winning move. And at this point, I think the United States, the people of the United States would rejoice. I think that they would be very supportive, because they understood. They've understood that Israel is the main destabilization factor in West Asia, and that somehow the United States is being led, like a bull with the ring in their nose. They're being led to clean up every Israeli misadventure, except this one is not a misadventure to clean up. This is now getting pounded to pieces by Iran.
Alex, the war is, many people are asking if the United States, every time Pete Hegseth comes out and says that we've destroyed Iranian Navy, Iranian air defense, Iranian ballistic missile, the missile production, everything, they have destroyed everything. But after all, they're not capable of opening up the Strait of Hormuz. And they're asking Europeans to help them. At least from what we've seen so far, Europe is doing everything for the United States and Israel to defend them. But when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, you see some sort of hesitation on the part of Europeans to be, to come out and talk about it. They're doing everything. We've learned that the British military analysts and military strategists are all of them are in the United States trying to design some sort of solution for the Strait of Hormuz. But here is what Pete Hegseth was asked by a reporter about the Strait of Hormuz. And here is what Pete Hegseth said.
You have said that the U.S. military has essentially aerial superiority, naval superiority over Iran, yet we're not escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Why? How did you not plan for this?
We planned for it. We recognize it. Because ultimately we want to do it sequentially in a way that makes the most sense for what we want to achieve and ensure that we're sending the right signals to the world when we do so. So when Chris Wright speaks or we speak, it's based on a full assessment of what we're up against, what we want to say to the world, how that we want them to see and understand the conflict. It's like this whole idea of the war widening. That's what the press wants to make it look like it's widening and chaos is ensuing. No, we're actually closing in on grabbing hold of and controlling what objectives we want to achieve and how we want to achieve them. It's called shaping operations and setting the conditions. But when you shape the environment, you don't always tell. Foolish political leaders and foolish military leaders of the past will hang an exact deadline on it. Or here's exactly when we'll do what we're going to do. Or here's how long it's going to take us. And then if you meet that, maybe you meet it. But if you don't, you fail. And if you're far beyond, we know exactly what we're shaping and why. We're sending those signals working across the interagency. The Strait of Hormuz is something we've paid attention to from the beginning. And the American people can rest assured we will ensure that our interests are advanced, no doubt.
Yeah, one thing I can say, this guy watched a lot of Hollywood movies, and I think that he feels that's one of those. What do you make of it, Alex?
Nima, he's such a lightweight. It's not true that they were paying attention to the Gate of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz from the beginning. They didn't. They were taken off guard. They were going for a regime change, and they thought they would get a regime change. They didn't even, Hormuz wasn't even an afterthought because they never thought that Iran closing the Gate of Hormuz was a risk. So now they're rushing to. This is, rushing to shut the barn door closed after the whole horses are already, around the mountain. Okay, so he's the Secretary of War. He has to stand there and pretend that he's competent, but it's clear that he is not. And it's clear that they went into this as a bunch of arrogant, hubristic cowboys who thought, we're the best, we're the greatest, we did this in Venezuela, how fantastic and brilliant was this? And then the Israelis are with us, and look what they did to Hezbollah, and look at what they did to Hamas, and we're gonna do the epic undertaking, and we're gonna come out winners. And they didn't think about, oh wait, what happens if we fail? And then they fired, I was told that one of these agencies, I think that National Security Agency or National Security Agency, I think. It's supposed to be staffed by, I think, 450 analysts. And I think they're down to 40. Because what happens in these when you have these agendas is that everybody who doesn't agree gets fired. And so you end up with a handful of yes men who will go along with whatever you need. And, Vice Admiral Fred Kemp was trying to discourage Trump from going to war. He got fired. Charlie Kirk tried hard to discourage Trump from going to war already, last summer when he got killed. General, I forget yeah, I forget the name now. I'm blanking out, but others who agreed, they stayed on. And then, like what you get is a cult. You get a cult of fanatics that are, they just got punched in the face, and now they have to go, oh no, it's nothing, it's fine, we're totally in control, don't worry. And this, you're getting to ridiculous to ridiculous scenes where it almost reminds you of Monty Python, the Black Knight who gets both his arms and both his legs cut off, and he still wants to fight, and he's still like, well, this is nothing, I can still fight you.
This is the way that you let Netanyahu and his gang run your country. This is amazing, Alex. You see a great big country, a superpower being run by a state called Israel. It's unbelievable.
Nima, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that this is something that we need to really ponder, because how can it be that a small country of so many people, the size of New Jersey, in the Mediterranean, who is completely and totally dependent on the United States for their security, how can it be that that little country is running a superpower of 330 million people with a 14-15 trillion GDP that even sends $3.8 billion to Israelis every year? How can it be that this little country can control this global superpower? And so we really need an answer to this question, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Let's take Albania, a similar sized country. You know how insane it would be to think that somehow Albania could get control of the United States? It's just simply so absurd that I think that we have to understand exactly how this happened and who is behind it, because it's obviously hidden. It must be hidden, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. And so, I'd like to remind everybody that Israel, the whole Zionist project, is the creation of the British Empire, and that the British Empire never ended. It, kind of reincarnated itself by attaching itself to the United States like a parasite. But it has...
Alex, not just, sorry for interrupting you, it's not just about Israel. All these Arab states were created by the British Empire. The whole region was shaped by them.
Yes, correct, yes, yeah. And then, they attached themselves to the United States like a parasite. They took control of the whole banking industry, and they took control of the media, and they took control of all the large strategic corporations. And so we see that there's a few Zionist billionaires who are in public eye, like Larry Ellison, like Paul Singer, a few names like that. But
Bill Ackman.
Bill Ackman, for example. But this must be a very, very cohesive, very extensive networks. And I think that it's just not even conceivable that they aren't in cahoots with the City of London. And I think that we could see that now with the Epstein files, who is most probably at the top of that pyramid. And they were the people who took Jeffrey Epstein as their agent, as their employee, who were paying them. Who pays the piper, calls the tune. So Jeffrey Epstein was visible and doing all this stuff, but we need to ask who's paying it. And then when you look at Jews, you see that there's a raging debate between these in the sense of Jewish eschatology. There's a raging debate between whether Jews just wait for their Messiah to come because it has to be the work of God, or can they take matters into their own hands and initiate the messianic times, the Armageddon themselves, because if they get the world to the point of Armageddon, then the Messiah will come. So that point of view is like, let's just blow everything up. Let's set the whole world on fire. But you only hear this one side. You don't hear that there's a whole very passionate segment of the Jewish population who are completely and totally passionately anti-Zionist because they don't agree on these points. And so, if one faction wins out because, they're visible, they're close to the levers of power, and they get to influence events, whereas others who are also Jewish and who are also very numerous, the Natura Carta Jews, they're disenfranchised. They have no voice. They're never heard anywhere. And so it turns out this is almost like a monolith. But it's not, because if one side wins out, it's because that side is being pushed, is being supported with money. Who has the money? The bankers. And who are being put, in contact with Trump, with Benjamin Netanyahu, with the Kushners, with I don't know if Witkoff is in it. I don't know if Lutnick is in it, but apparently they are. Allegedly they are. So, and then somehow you arrange that all these people find themselves inside of the Trump administration, and that when everybody has been let go or cut out of the loop on, apparently what they're saying is that the Joe Kent wasn't even in the briefings when the war on Iran was being discussed, even though he's the nation's anti-terrorism czar.
Yeah, the director of the counterterrorism center. Yeah,
right. So that tells you that they have kind of hijacked the whole process of the government. How can that be? It's not because Benjamin Netanyahu is so powerful. It's because there's like a whole new other layer of control that's deep in the shadows that we're not meant to ask questions about, that we're not meant to know about, but who are able to move these pieces around. And I think that Jeffrey Epstein was not even at that level, that this level still goes up because we know that Ariane de Rothschild hired him. So she was paying. And then we know that even when it came to the pandemic, that her institution, the Edmond de Rothschild Foundation, together with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, together with World Health Organization and so forth, planned and orchestrated the public health event from a couple of years ago. And how is this even possible? Well, obviously, we know from the Epstein files that it was possible. We have enough written paper trail to know for sure that this is what they were doing. And so we can assume that if they could get the pandemic going, that they can get the war against Iran going.
Alex, I think they have managed to infiltrate both parties in the United States. When you see the Democrats, you see Soros, mostly, Soros, they have all these, good, sort of propaganda that, we are human right, democracy, all of this, going to the countries, destroying the country, everything under, democracy and human right. And on the other hand, you see they have infiltrated, the Republican Party. Even MAGA was infiltrated by these people. They're so powerful. They know the system. That's why they're so much capable of, managing the system. I think many people are shocked by the decision of the Trump administration because they they're witnessing someone who is totally 180% 80 degree, different from what he was talking about before being elected in the United States. That's a huge shock for the whole, those people like Tucker Carlson, even the guy Joe Kent, who was working for Donald Trump, who was believing that Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, these people are not, these are intelligent people. These are so smart. They're not stupid, but they were tricked. They were somehow, or the Zionists were so much powerful that somehow convinced the whole administration that this is the right way to go. And I think this is a huge disappointment. And the people are somehow desperate in the United States, who they can believe anymore. Who's gonna be? Even J.D. Vance is not gonna be that, because he is showing something that he's somehow destroying his. If he wants to be 2028 presidential candidate, he's destroying it, literally, by being somehow silent, not talking that much about it. Tulsi Gabbard was just somehow, she destroyed everything. Many people who supported Tulsi Gabbard, who thought that Tulsi Gabbard going to be a game changer in the Trump administration, together with Kash Patel. You know what we've learned? Kash Patel is making a new case against Joe Kent.
Yes.
In FBI. This is just amazing what's happening.
Apparently, they're also going after Tucker Carlson.
Oh.
But you see, Nima, none of this was meant to happen, because this lever of control is meant to be hidden from us. And it seems to me that the level of desperation, because we have to remember they had a number of extremely important projects on their agenda. One of them was the pandemic, right? The pandemic was meant, so I'm not talking about Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and war in Iran. I'm just talking about the top level, the top echelon, who's trying to create a system of global control where they would rule forever and probably create a kingdom in Jerusalem and have the Pax Judaica, essentially. The pandemic was their project, and pandemic was supposed to end in a completely new normal. Remember, they were promising us there's no return to the new normal, at least until we have everybody vaccinated, and that whole thing unraveled completely. And then the next extremely important project was net zero. That is falling apart. That is in the advanced stages of falling apart. So, there's not going to be, the world is going to go back to coal and nuclear and oil and gas, and, people will do what they have to do to get their energy. So they're not everybody's going to switch to solar and wind and downsize their economies in order to usher this new world order, whatever they had in mind. Now you have very, very strong reactions against illegal immigrants, but that's just part of the game. But the third extremely important project that they had was Ukraine. Now they lost there, and then the last of these projects that they had was taking total control of the Western Asia, and that was already formulated in 2001, and we know that from Wesley Clark, and so it was in September or October 2001 that Wesley Clark got that briefing that, we're going after 7 countries in 5 years. Or was it 5 countries in 7 years? No, it was 7 in 5 years. 7 in 5 years. So in 2001.
Yeah, it was 7 in 5 years, Alex.
So that means that they should have achieved regime change in Iran in 2006. That's 20 years ago. And then, they needed to get Trump into the White House to get that project going, and now they're losing. So I think, Nima, that they are in a blind panic because everything is falling apart. And not only that, but unlike for decades and centuries past, there was no alternative. It was a European, Western-centric world. Now you have China, you have Russia, and I think that Iran is going to emerge as a major power in Western Asia, and they all understand how the game is played, and they all know exactly who the enemy is. And I think just, for American people watching this, I would say do not despair, because now you know things that you were not meant to know. And the United States will incubate new leadership. Maybe it won't be anybody we know at the moment, but in 1998, nobody knew that Vladimir Putin existed in Russia. And then, he was brought to the fore and everything changed. And so I think the same will be the case in the United States. I would say keep on keeping on. Keep researching the truth, keep telling the truth, speaking the truth. I think that us knowing the truth literally will make us free. And, the people who made the deal with the devil, they will fall, and they are falling. And this is why they're panicked, because, if they were doing well, if they were confident and in control, none of this would be visible. Because that's how it was between since World War II. We watched Hollywood movies, we watched sports, we went to our jobs, made our money until pension, and then, enjoyed our pension. Now everything is falling apart, and people are paying very, very close attention to what is going on. So just because everybody you see in Washington, D.C. has lost your confidence, remember how things went elsewhere, that somebody you don't even know exists might suddenly catalyze all this energy and bring it together and take the country in a different direction. But that happens unless you surrender. So just never surrender.
Alex, what's so amazing for many people is that we remember when the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, everybody was talking about, and the axis of resistance was somehow weakened. They have no power right now. There is no connection between Iran and Lebanon. The Houthis in Yemen somehow were managed by the United States. Iraq is under the control of the United States because they have a big base in Iraq and big, embassy. All these Persian Gulf, Arab states are under the control of the United States. Then the war started in Iran, and you see the axis of resistance coming out. They're just making a huge difference, reshaping the whole Middle East. And it's something that nobody was talking about. And we were mentioning, you and me, we were mentioning it, that this is not the case. They're not weakened. And you see Lebanon is hitting the southern part of Israel, not the northern part of it. They have never done that. How do you see the way that the acts of resistance, and even, just mentioning all of that, Hezbollah in Lebanon, together with Iran, we haven't seen Houthis or Yemenis joining the fight. They're just, stand by, waiting for the right moment if they need to join the war.
Yes, correct, Nima. I think that at this stage, it's like an avalanche. It cannot be reversed. And so now every success of the axis of resistance is going to galvanize that energy further. And then, let's not forget Jordan, because Jordan is like a non-entity there, but it's more than half of Jordan's population are Palestinians, and you have just a weak puppet king there, protected by, British SAS, I think, who are going to be easy to overthrow at some point. And then you have that population. And then there's Egypt, where, the ordinary people have had it with just passively watching the Palestinian people being genocided. That front might get activated. So it could be like a forest fire where nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden everything goes up in flame because there's so much dry tinder lying around that it's just a question of a spark happening, a spark. And I think that we're getting there. Israel is being weaker and weaker. It's being destroyed as we speak. It's very clear that American military power is no longer sufficient to protect Israel. Americans know it. Israelis know it. Everybody else is finding out. Europeans are too scared. Well, on account of European, Nima, remember when they had the Prosperity Guardian, the Operation Prosperity Guardian, which they launched in December of 2023? They were going to keep the Red Sea open. And then, the Americans came and the British came, and then the French sent some of their warships. And then when the French warships got into the Red Sea and started hitting the Houthi positions, the Houthis shot back. And then the French were practically shocked, like, who do these people think they are, shooting back at us? But what they decided to do is basically turn around and leave the region. They were like, these people fight back. What are we doing here? Let's leave. So who's going to dare to go to war against Iran now? The Americans are fantasizing about taking control of the Karg Island. Nima, I watched this general on CNN saying how, oh yeah, Marines, this is what they do. They're like super effective, and we have air superiority, and we have naval superiority. And I'm thinking, like, are you serious? You just spent 20 years trying to subdue the Taliban in Afghanistan, and you failed, and you think you're going to sail into the Persian Gulf and take an Iranian island, and you think that the Iranians are just going to go like, oh, we forgot to prepare the defenses of the island where 90% of our oil export goes through. We just didn't think of that. And look, they took it from us now. It's like everybody's gone mad, Nima. It's like everybody has gone mad. And those who are not mad are either jumping ship or are being pushed off board. Like either they're being fired or they're resigning themselves. And only the cult, the fanatical cult, has stayed, who are saying God is willing. It's like the crusade. It's like the Crusades. It's just insane. Can you believe this is the 21st century? I thought we were going to have flying cars.
Yeah.
And here we're fighting the Crusades, apparently.
Alex, what is happening with the war in Iran is something so much beneficial for BRICS and the future of BRICS, because not only reshaping the whole Middle East, which in my opinion, if we consider, the South Caucasus would be the heart of the Eurasia, would be the heart of BRICS, in my opinion. And right now what's going on, reshaping the whole Middle East would benefit the whole concept of BRICS. And you see how Russia is benefiting from the war. And a stronger Russia would be a stronger BRICS, would be stronger the whole, the alternative for what the West has right now. And they thought that India before the war happening, Prime Minister of India went to Israel. They said, oh, the BRICS is over, and then it's nothing. No, but we know who's the foundation of BRICS. We know who are the main, constituents of BRICS. Right now, it seems that everybody is changing against Europe. Europe has been bought in this foolish war in Ukraine, and they're continuing in that direction. How do you see the future of Europe? Are they going to perceive what's going on?
No, Nima. Europe doesn't have a future. It's just a matter of time, because now Hungary is going into elections, and look at what's happening. The Europeans are actively conspiring against the current president of Hungary, Viktor Orban. They have put all their cards on his challenger. His name is something Magyar. Forget his first name, but he's obviously a puppet, like kind of like Matteo Renzi, like Emmanuel Macron, like Olaf Scholz. It's like the Finnish president Alex Staub. Like it's almost like a cookie cutter version of these globalist puppets that they control. Sadly for me, also the Croatian president fits that mold as well. No, not the president, the prime minister. The president is more in Viktor Orban's camp. But basically, instead of allowing the Hungarian people to make up their own minds, they're already conspiring with the big tech to support this Magyar guy against Viktor Orban, and to silence the supporters of Viktor Orban, to make it look like he's very unpopular, like this other guy, this little Soros lapdog is the popular guy. And so what this shows is that the European Union will not change course. So they are, with everything that they have, they're pushing in the direction of escalating the confrontation against Russia and turning Europe into like a monolithic block where everybody submits to the rulings from Brussels. Everybody bows down to Ursula von der Leyen. And if she says to war, we all go to war. If she says all of your taxes, all of your money to Zelensky, everybody says like, yes, ma'am, all of our money goes to Zelensky. So Viktor Orban says, no, sorry, it's not going to be like that. And now European Union is saying, okay, then you're out. We're going to do everything to overthrow you. And so the problem is that that will bring the European Union to the point of disintegration. Because now, if this is the case, Viktor Orban, parties like AfD in Germany, Poland possibly, Slovakia, Romania, many countries might say, this is complete insanity. We're taking our sovereignty back. If you want to discuss being an economic union, a common market where we trade without tariffs and obstacles, then fine, we're interested in that. But we're not going in the direction of a political union, especially one run by completely incompetent, unelected clowns who are driving us to a nuclear annihilation. And so I think that since neither side will change course, the Hungarians, the Romanians lost in these last elections, but that political movement didn't disappear. It's still there. So it's, countries like Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Germany, ultimately with AfD, France, possibly with Assemblée Nationale, they're all going to be going in the direction of reclaiming their sovereignty. And at the same time, the EU will be pushing towards creating a united monolith. And they will fail because they have no popular support whatsoever. So they will fail. it's just a question of time. So we will get some kind of a rupture like we had in 1991 with the Soviet Union. And there are so many parallels. I think that the Soviet leaders were not half as stupid as the EU leaders today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex, for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Great pleasure, as
Always
always.
good to join you. Take care.
See you soon, Alex. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.